The Twits, page 39 to 50. The Great Upside Down Monkey Circus. Now for the monkeys. The 4 monkeys in the cage in the garden were all one family. They were Mugglewump and his wife and their 2 small children. But what on earth were Mr. and Mrs. Twit doing with monkeys in their garden? Well, in the old days they had worked in a circus as monkey trainers. They used to teach the monkeys how to do tricks and to dress up in human clothes and to smoke pipes and all the rest of that nonsense. Today, although they were retired, Mr. Twit still wanted to train monkeys. It was his dream that one day he would own the first great upside-down monkey circus in the world. That meant that the monkeys had to do everything upside down. They had to dance upside down on their hands with their feet in the air. They had to play football upside down. They had to balance on one on top of another upside down with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest baby monkey at the very top. They had to even eat and drink upside down, and that is not an easy thing to do because the food and water has to go up your throat instead of down it. In fact, it is almost impossible, but the monkeys simply had to do it, otherwise they got nothing. All this sounds pretty silly to you and me. It sounds pretty silly to the monkeys, too. They absolutely hated having to do this upside-down nonsense day after day. It made them giddy standing on their heads for hours on end. Sometimes the 2 small monkeys would faint with so much blood going to their heads. But Mr. Twit didn't care about that. He kept them practicing for 6 hours every day, and if they didn't do as they were told, Mrs. Twit would soon come running with her beastly stick. The roly-poly bird to the rescue. Mugglewump and his family longed to escape from the cage in Mr. Twit's garden and to go back to the African jungle where they had come from. They hated Mr. and Mrs. Twit for making their lives so miserable. They also hated them for what they did to the birds every Tuesday and Wednesday. "Fly away, birds," they used to shout, jumping about in the cage and waving their arms. "Don't sit on that big dead tree. It has just been smeared all over with sticky glue. Go sit in somewhere else." But these were English birds, and they couldn't understand the weird African language the monkeys spoke. So they took no notice and went on using the big dead tree and getting caught for Mrs. Twit's bird pie. Then, one day, a truly magnificent bird flew down out of the sky and landed on the monkey cage. "Good heavens!" cried all the monkeys together. "It's the roly-poly bird. What on earth are you doing over here in England, roly-poly bird?" Like the monkeys, the roly-poly bird had come from Africa, and he spoke the same language as they did. "I've come for a holiday," said the roly-poly bird. "I like to travel." He fluffed his marvelous colored feathers and looked down rather grandly at the monkeys. "For most people," he went on, "flying away on holiday is very expensive, but I can fly anywhere in the world for nothing." "Do you know how to talk to these English birds?" Mugglewump asked him. "Of course I do," said the roly-poly bird. It's no good going to a country and not knowing the language." "Then we must hurry," said Mugglewump. "Today is Tuesday, and over there you can already see the revolting Mr. Twit up the ladder, painting sticky glue all over the branches of the big dead tree. This evening, when the birds come in to roost, you must warn them not to perch on that tree, or they will be made into bird pie." That evening, the roly-poly bird flew around and around the big dead tree, singing out, "There's sticky stuff, sticky stuff all over the tree. If you land in the branches, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up tomorrow in a hot bird pie." No bird pie for Mr. Twit. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket to snatch up all the birds from the big dead tree, there wasn't a single one on it. They were all sitting on top of the monkey cage. The roly-poly bird and the Mugglewumps and his family were inside the cage, and the whole lot of them were laughing at Mr. Twit. Still no bird pie for Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit wasn't going to wait another week for his bird pie supper. He loved bird pie. It was his favorite meal. So that very same day, he went after the birds again. This time he smeared glue on all the top bars of the monkey cage with sticky glue, as well as the branches of the big dead tree. "Now I'll get you," he said, "whichever one you sit on." The monkeys crouched inside the cage watching all of this, and later on, when the roly-poly bird came swooping in for an evening chat, they shouted out, "Don't land on our cage, roly-poly bird. It's covered with sticky glue. So is the tree." And that evening, as the sun went down and all the birds came in again to roost, the roly-poly bird flew around and around the monkey cage and the big dead tree, singing out his warning. "There's sticky stuff now on the cage and the tree. If you land on either, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up tomorrow in a hot bird pie." Mr. and Mrs. Twit go off to buy guns. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. "I'll wipe that silly laugh of yours off your beaks," Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and I'll have you bubbling in the pot for the bird pie before this day is out." "How are you going to do that?" asked Mrs. Twit, who had come outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit went very close to Mrs. Twit and lowered his voice so that neither the birds nor the monkeys should hear. "I've got a great idea," he said. "We'll both go into town right away and we'll buy a gun each. How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. "We'll buy those big shotguns that spray out 50 bullets or more with each bang." "Exactly," said Mr. Twit. "Lock up the house while I go and make sure the monkeys are safely shut away." Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Attention!" he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer's voice. "Upside down, all of you, jump to it, one on top of each other. Quick, get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit's stick across your backsides." Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on top of their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Muggle-Wump at the bottom and the smallest child at the very top. "Now, stay there till we come back," said Mr. Twit, "and don't you dare move, and don't overbalance it. When we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find you all in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?" With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds.